We're on the phone live now with Ben Golliver. Ben is a national NBA writer for the Washington Post. Ben, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with us.
It's my pleasure, guys. How's it going?
I'm doing pretty well. Again, thank you for the interview. So we want to start this interview off so we can get to know you more, and the fans can get to know you more. How did you start? Where did your path start to get to this media business? Like, were you middle school writer, high school writer? Where did you start?
So you guys are ahead of the game for sure. I mean, it sounds like you already know what you wanted to do and trying to turn this into a career. I always loved writing and I always loved sports, but somehow I was just a knucklehead and I never figured out that I could kind of put those two things together until way late in the game. So I went to college for writing, and when I graduated, I was actually just working kind of like a marketing job in Portland, Oregon. And on the night of the 2007 NBA draft lottery, the Blazers won the rights to the number one pick. And of course, immediately everyone wanted to debate, Greg Oden or Kevin Durant. And most of the people were pretty excited about the possibility of getting Greg Oden, because back then, the idea of a big time center was how you would win a title in the NBA. I took a little different approach. I started a blogspot blog that same night, on the draft lottery night, called Draft Kevin Durant. And I basically just posted kind of goofy essays on there day after day, trying to make the case for why the Blazers should take Kevin Durant. And to be honest, I got so deep into it. It was such a passion project that I kind of brainwashed myself into thinking that they would actually do it. And so, I wound up watching the NBA draft, kind of expecting that they were going to take my advice, right? I had made such a compelling argument, and instead they take Oden, and I was crestfallen, and I thought, well, there goes my writing career. That was grand opening, grand closing, as Jay-Z would say, and now I got to figure out something else to do. What I realized was, the internet was a great platform, especially at that point, kind of before social media, where you could kind of learn on the job. And so I started at a Blazers blog called Blazers Edge, which had already been established, and it was still, kind of small and underground, but we worked really, really hard over the course of the next couple of seasons to provide, lots of coverage of the team. I was going to practices and training camp and summer league and home games, and I was sort of just doing it as a moonlighting project, kind of like a night job. And, slowly but surely I was kind of able to build myself up as a, kind of somebody who was known. I tried to break news every once in a while and definitely, poured over my reports about the games to kind of give people, a deep understanding of that team. And that wound up kind of getting me onto the radar a little bit. I started at CBS Sports as a writer in 2010, and that's really when I kind of left my day job completely behind and said, okay, I'm just going to be a writer from here going forward. And then from CBS, I went to SI a couple years later, Sports Illustrated, and I was there for 6 years, kind of covering the league at large and, writing magazine features and, doing podcasts and really trying to be as, diverse in my skills as possible. And then, in December, I actually started at the Washington Post, where I'm doing a lot of the same things, whether it's, doing live coverage from games, whether it's doing feature stories, whether it's doing profiles, which I really love to do. I love profiling athletes and trying to figure out what makes them tick, coaches and executives as well. And, I'm still doing podcasts too. So I try to be a jack of all trades, but I always tell people I backed into it. I would never say anyone, follow my steps, because you would get lost. It really doesn't make a lot of sense. If you told me 10 years ago that this is where I'd be, I would have thought you were lying.
Yeah, that's a crazy story. Just in general, like you said, I'm not sure that anyone could follow those steps completely accurate, but it's crazy, and obviously it's been successful to the point where you are now. Can you talk about your experience? You mentioned obviously that you just started with the Washington Post in December. Can you talk about how it's been and some of the biggest stories and events that you've covered already?
Yeah, well, I love the Post. I mean, first of all, I've been reading the Post for years and years and years, and my dad used to always tell me, the Post, they passed the New York Times, like he wants to turn it into like a Jordan versus LeBron debate, between those two papers. And so, I felt kind of a special joy to kind of tell him, hey, I'm going to be working for this paper, because I just think they're doing such important work in terms of politics and international relations. But, the Post, a lot like SI, has a really long history of just great sports writers going back decades. And so that was one thing that got me excited about working for them. And they really support their writers. It's been unbelievable in terms of the kinds of resources they've put towards me. Just as an example, I mean, I think I've probably pitched 5 or 6 different stories that have me travel around the country, and they've said yes to every single one of them. And that doesn't always happen in today's media environment. So I've really appreciated that. And then on top of that, they just got the staff of just super smart, hardworking people. So we did a big story recently kind of comparing LeBron James and Michael Jordan as scorers, because I'm sure you guys know LeBron's about to pass Michael on the all-time scoring list. And so I talked to a bunch of former players and asked them, hey, what makes Michael a great scorer? What makes LeBron a great scorer? Did they have any weaknesses? What tricks could you use to kind of guard these guys? And, I talked to Doug Christie, who defended LeBron in his very first game in the league. I talked to Joe Smith, a big man who had to try to provide help defense on Michael during his prime, and then do the same thing against LeBron, during his prime. And it was fascinating to hear their perspectives. But what was really cool is at the Post, they were able to build this whole story with interactive graphics and charts and everything showing, where LeBron could wind up as finishing as a scorer if he plays for 2 more years or 5 more years or 6 more years. Just doing all these kinds of things that as a writer, I would never be able to do by myself. And it's that kind of teamwork and that support system that I think really sets the Post apart. And I'm really proud of that project. If you guys get a chance to check it out, it's really immersive. As you're scrolling down, it kind of just captures all of your attention, and you don't want to take your eyes off of it because the graphics are so cool and the charts are so cool. And to me, it's just awesome to be at a publication that has that kind of vision, that kind of resources, and can really follow through, because everybody can come up with good ideas. There's no question about that. But to take an idea to a finished product is really, really hard. And sometimes it can be out of your hands, as a writer, because you're relying on other people. And I think that's what's great about the Post is, they can really help you with that follow through.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it sounds like it's awesome. And we've seen a little bit of the piece about LeBron versus Michael. So I want to piggyback on that a little bit. LeBron James is my personal favorite player of all time. Mikey tends to lead towards the Jordan side, but I think it's very fascinating because I think that LeBron's scoring ability is actually slept on in the sense that he's not really regarded to as a scorer, but at the same time, he's a 27-point-a-game scorer. I mean, there's only so many of those that have ever played in the NBA with the efficiency that he has. So I do want to ask you, why do you feel maybe that his scoring is overlooked? And then I do want to ask you to compare the players and maybe even give who you feel is better.
So in terms of pure scoring, I lean Michael Jordan just because he was wired to do that. And I think that's the key difference is that LeBron said it himself. I wasn't born to be a scorer. I was born to be a playmaker. And that's the thing about LeBron is he so effortlessly balances the passing, the distribution, the setting up of his teammates versus his own ability to hit 3-pointers, to drive into the paint, to get fouled, to finish above the rim, to take off in transition, and all the different ways that he can score. He's just so fluid in his ability to kind of shift between those responsibilities. And if you go back and watch the Jordan tapes, I mean, he improved as a playmaker for his teammates, over the course of his career. Everybody always says the important element was the trust because he used to think he was so good and such a polished scorer that it didn't matter if he was being triple teamed, he could still get it done. And if his teammates were wide open, so what? And I think what he realized over the course of his career is that a little bit of balance would help him, be more successful than if he tried to just do it all by himself. But LeBron came in already understanding that intuitively. It was kind of ingrained into him by his youth coaches, and he fully bought into that. And that's what makes him so dangerous. It's actually his passing ability that winds up setting up a lot of what he does because it's very difficult to double team him. You can't really trap him. It's hard to surprise him. He's seen every single defense. He understands the game like his brain's basically a basketball computer. And so that winds up just setting up lots of opportunities for him to break you down. And his physicality, of course, going to the hoop is very hard to stop. The way that I kind of compare these two guys, I think Jordan's the greatest player of all time because when you look at the 90s, the gap between Jordan and any other player was so wide. And his dominance of the sport was so sustained for such a long period of time, that, it's summarized by that 6-0 finals record, but they didn't ever have to use a game 7 in the finals. He was hardly ever really challenged in the playoffs during his peak. And he was there delivering it in the key moments, and facing really hard-nosed defenses, basically every step of the way. I think what LeBron has, though, to his benefit, it's the longevity factor, it's the consistency factor, and it's the evolution, frankly. Because if you look at where the NBA was 10 years ago to where it is today, the league has changed entirely. I mean, the three-pointer has become such a big deal, switching lineups, fast-paced basketball, and LeBron came in a very, very different era. So for him to be successful in all of these different eras and to be such an incredible player, it's incredible. And I think that really is kind of how I would frame that debate. To me, LeBron's number 2 all time in terms of the greatest players. And I think he's going to have a really strong case when he retires that he had the greatest career of anybody once you add up all of the accomplishments, the fact that he could wind up being, top. He could be number 1 all time in scoring. He could be, top 6 or 7 in assists. He's tops in playoff points. I mean, he has all these different accomplishments statistically that I think is going to wind up giving him that greatest career tag.
Yeah. So, as you said, the evolution of basketball in 10 years, I think that shows no more than, as you talked about the Greg Oden and Kevin Durant debate. When it was a debate, it was because Greg Oden was a big. We have that debate right now. It would have been like, there's one of them 7 foot tall and shoots. Give me that one.
And just by the way, turns out you were right. They could have drafted Kevin.
Yeah.
Well, look, if I had done the draft Greg Oden blog, I probably wouldn't be sports writing. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where you get lucky. I had a hunch. It paid off great. And Kevin Durant has evolved even past my wildest expectations for what he could be as a player. And he did it quick, too. I mean, he really vaulted himself up within about 3 years to that all-NBA first-team level. And to me, that's, one argument against LeBron is that the gap between Jordan, whoever that number 2 player was during his prime, was so big. The gap between LeBron and KD is noticeable. I mean, LeBron has definitely been better here over the last 6 or 7 years than KD, but the gap really isn't that big. And KD, to me, going into next season, he's going to have a strong case as being the best overall player in basketball just because of LeBron's age and because of, just the miles and everything else catching up to him.
Yeah, no, I do completely understand that. It also does speak to the league, the talent proportional, but I also do have another question regarding a legend that unfortunately is retiring after this year. We saw that you got to witness one last dance in LA. How is that, seeing the embrace and like the showmanship and the competitiveness between LeBron and Dwayne Wade for that time on the road?
So Dwayne Wade and LeBron have come so far, guys. I'll tell you, my very first NBA Finals I covered was the Mavericks series, Heat versus Mavericks. And it just bugged me to no end that LeBron and Dwayne Wade, who were in the process of watching that series slip away from them, were going to do that silly coughing thing with, making fun of Dirk Nowitzki, a guy who's on track to be a Hall of Famer, and, he's sick, and let's mock him. At that time, I just didn't get it. It's like, guys, why are you doing this? You're so skilled. You're probably the 2 best players in the league that season. Keep your focus on basketball. Don't be, making these distractions and storylines. So watch how far they went from that moment to where they both wind up winning titles together, where they both, leave Miami and then, kind of have to change their lives and put the pieces back together in new places. Wade going back to Miami, which seemed such like an obvious decision when he did it. And I was so glad that he did because it gives him closure. It gives the fans closure. And then to see them share that last dance moment that you mentioned in LA where I thought they were going to both break down in tears. I mean, it was that level of emotion and they were so glad to share that court. It came down to the final possession. I think LeBron got the best of Dwayne Wade in that situation. But it was also cool to see him at All-Star Weekend, throwing the lobs to each other and having a good time. It just shows you, like, the relationships that can form through sports, even at the very highest level where the egos and the money are so big. I mean, those are relationships that are genuine and they can last a lifetime. And, it was lucky. I mean, it's definitely one of those bucket list moments. I always remember where I was for that game, because it was sort of the perfect signature goodbye, for these 2 guys who really dominated the sport together and changed the way free agency and teaming up and super teams and all that stuff. They changed that whole game, and those were the 2 key personalities that drove all of that.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like it was an amazing experience, and LeBron definitely changed the way free agency carries out to this day. I'm not sure if he saw the Kevin Durant situation happening with Golden State and prohibiting him from winning a couple more rings, maybe, but it's definitely changed free agency and the sport as a whole for the future. But I did want to you touched on it briefly, All-Star Weekend. We know that you were there covering it. Can you give us a little recap of what the experience of the whole entire weekend is like and what the atmosphere is there?
Well, I hate to be a spoiled guest because, I mean, going to All-Star Weekend is such a treat. But there's been some just amazing All-Star Weekends over the past years. And I think for me, Charlotte, it fell a little bit flat just because Michael Jordan was so concerned about kind of playing the background. Like he didn't want to be front and center and he didn't really do a big press conference and he wasn't at the slam dunk contest. I mean, he could have easily been a judge, right? But, you know, he was kind of, you know, leaving those kinds of jobs to, you know, other former players. And so it was a little bit of a letdown from that standpoint, but I love All-Star Weekend because I'm just a slam dunk contest dork. And it really wasn't the best dunk contest we've ever seen, but, have a no-name guy like Hamidou Diallo kind of like pop out of nowhere, jump over Shaq, you know, put his elbow on the rim, and then rip off that Superman cape underneath his jersey. I loved it. I mean, that was such a great moment.
I have to briefly interrupt you there because we actually run a show from the company. It's called the Nothin Show, and on the show, we were talking about, we did an All-Star special and we were preluding to the event that would occur. And we talked about the dunk competition, and I have to give Hamidou Diallo an apology because I kind of made fun of the dunk competition. I'm like, there's people that we don't even know that are going into this dunk competition, and I wasn't familiar with him at the time. And then I looked him up and saw his past dunks, and obviously he took it away with this one. So I just wanted to.
Yeah, well, you learned a very valuable lesson, which is if the guy makes the dunk contest and you've never heard of him, he's probably incredible at dunking. Like we learned that from Derek Jones.
Very true.
And the guys who actually scout out the dunk contest are the consultants who help the NBA pick these players. They're deep in those YouTube mixtape game, man. They know these guys, and that was one of the coolest things about the dunk contest. After the contest, I actually went up to Diallo and I said, "Hey, man, next year, do you want Zion in this dunk contest, right? I mean, everybody wants to see Zion Williamson in the NBA dunk contest." And Diallo, like, this kind of like light bulb flash, you know, you can kind of see it in his face and he says, "Yeah, let's do it." I actually was in a dunk contest in high school against Zion and Zion beat me. And he remembered all the details of the contest and he was like all excited about the concept of maybe getting his revenge next year in Chicago. So that part to me was really exciting because I think there's a little sub community of people who just love dunk contests and appreciate it almost like an art form. And I really loved what Diallo did in the contest in terms of, like I said, the showmanship. But then to have the confidence to say, like, hey, bring it on. You know, Zion's going to have all the hype next year. Let's do it. Let's have the rematch from high school. That got my heart going. I was so excited, and I hope it comes together. I mean, my dream field next year would be Diallo, Zion Williamson, Zach LaVine, Aaron Gordon. Let's run back the rematches, you know, from Toronto, that incredible contest between Gordon and LaVine. Let's have LaVine kind of be the host of the whole thing in Chicago because he plays for the Bulls. And let's get some young blood with Diallo trying to defend his title and then Zion just being that rookie sensation. I would love to see that.
I think all NBA fans would love to see that. That would be
I think that's
incredible.
The best dunk contest you can make, honestly.
And I do want to go on the record to say that Aaron Gordon was robbed and Zach LaVine should not have won that last one. But we know we're nearing our time, but yesterday on our Instagram story, we actually posted that we are going to be interviewing you, and we were collecting questions from a couple of our followers. And several people responded, one of which we're going to select their question to ask to you. His name is Tyler Schmidt. He's actually from the Portland, Oregon area. He moved down to Miami, and he was actually a big fan of yours. Always used to read your articles, and once he saw your name, he was very excited to know that we were going to be interviewing you. He wants to know, what was your favorite memory with the Portland Trailblazers, whether it be from a media standpoint, whether it be interaction with some of the players, fans. What was your favorite moment, and do you ever miss working with the Trailblazers?
I loved covering the Portland Trailblazers because I grew up following the team during the Rip City era. So this is way before you guys were probably even alive. But the Clyde Drexler, Terry Porter era was just an incredible time to grow up for an old guy like me. So to be able to kind of come full circle after college and cover that organization was great. There's so many memorable moments. I mean, I think the obvious one would be Brandon Roy's, playoff game against the Dallas Mavericks, the big fourth quarter comeback. Jason Quick is at The Athletic now, wrote a great and very heartfelt piece about that game. It actually just went up this week, so I encourage people to go read that. But one other moment that I've always has stuck with me, and this is for like the real, Blazer maniacs, but I was actually at a place that's called Big Al's. It's sort of like a Chuck E. Cheese's for adults. It's like a bowling alley, and they got the arcades and all that. And I was there to interview Greg Oden, and it was during, one of his injury comebacks. And it was hilarious because for whatever reason, they decided to put us in like the birthday party room, and they had Greg Oden, this, 7-foot center. I mean, you guys remember how big he was. They had him down in a little kid's chair. So he's sitting just a few inches up off the ground. He's got his big knees up by his ears, cause he's like, folded up and crunched into this chair. And I'll just never forget that image of him. It was just such a funny thing to be involved in. But I also just remember what a genuinely nice guy and funny and a happy person he was. And a lot of things went wrong for him. I mean, the injuries, he's talked about having depression. I think he struggled with some drinking as well. And he's really just trying to put his life back together after the fact. But I always remember how happy and excited he was at that moment and how deeply he cared about basketball and how much he wanted to be contributing back on the court after that injury. And he was so generous with his time. I thought we were had a real nice heart-to-heart conversation. The fans were so excited to hear from him because he hadn't really been doing very many interviews at that stage of his career. So it was just nice for him to kind of open up, at that point. And I'll just always remember that. It wound up not really panning out for him, of course. The Blazers tried to make it work, and, just eventually there was too many surgeries, and they had to let him go. And he tried to catch on with the Heat for a little bit, and that really didn't work either. But he's one of those cautionary tales, one of those number one picks who's always going to kind of be remembered for the wrong reasons. But, to me, I always just appreciated the way he handled himself in that situation. A lot of NBA players, they'd see that little kid's chair and they'd say, you know what? I'm not doing this. Let's find somewhere else, or maybe let's just even cancel the interview. And the fact that he didn't, and he was such a good trooper and good sport about it, I will always appreciate that.
Yeah, it sounds like a genuine experience. And unfortunately, it's one of those things. It's so easy to look back and say, oh, wow, they really chose him over Kevin Durant. But at the time, it was a legitimate decision,
if he could have stayed
especially
healthy,
with where the league was at.
If he stayed healthy and it happened, that's a different decision. Like, it wasn't even within his control. That's right. The worst part. Like, if he came out and he was an actual bust, then so be it. But the fact that, like, being an 18, 19-year-old kid just trying to make it in the league, and almost every time, a month or two before the season, something else happens, you feel for him. We see the same thing with Derrick Rose. Thankfully, he's been able to play a lot more. But with Greg Oden, every time he was hurt, it's like, oh, man. Every time seemed like the time. Every single time, I'm not going to lie, I bet every time, like, he's coming back. We're going to see, he won't be the Greg Oden we thought of, but we'll see Greg Oden play basketball. And every time we got robbed of that, and more importantly, he got robbed of that.
Well, let me ask you this, guys. Who's winning the title this year?
Unfortunately,
I got Golden State
the
in
Warriors.
3. Whoever they play, no matter.
Well, if they win it, is KD leaving? If they win, will that be his big coup de grace? Is he headed on?
In my opinion, it becomes very interesting because I think if he wants to, obviously we've heard different reports from different writers or different analysts that say that he wants the global recognition that he's the best player in the world. I don't think, personally, this is my opinion, I don't think he'll get that unless he goes to his own team and really showcases his ability. Obviously, he does that with the Warriors, but the fact is, I mean, you can't really double team him. He's playing with 4 other elite options. The Warriors starting lineup for this playoffs is going to be better than our past All-Star or our past Olympic team starting lineup. So, I mean, and it's not even an exaggeration. It's actually true. So when you look at that, I mean, to me, I don't understand what would be so lucrative about just stacking up championships because, yes, they're championships, but at the same time, when you're on that team, of course you're going to win a championship. If you go to another team and you really, carry people. Because in my opinion, again, this is all my opinion, I believe that there's weight to NBA championships. Because you can't tell me that, going back to LeBron, the ring that he won against the Warriors, a 73-9 team coming back from 3-1, that has the same weight of the Warriors playing the Cavs last year in the finals, which was a sweep and nowhere close to the skill level. So I believe that Kevin Durant, if it's a legacy move that he wants to be remembered as, improve his position on the list of the league's greatest players ever, I think he will.
I don't know. I think because if let's say they win it this year, it's 3 straight championships, most likely 3 straight finals MVPs in the year LeBron James misses the playoffs, where we don't get any LeBron James. No one's talking about, oh, LeBron James just had a triple-double. Oh, LeBron just had a game winner. It's like, oh, look at them. Look at KD. KD being the best player on a stacked team, too. That's the thing, too. If he wins the finals MVP with this team, it's like, he's been better than Steph all 3 years. The player that has 2 MVPs, he's better than him. If he leaves, I'd like to see him go to the Knicks, go play with Kyrie, maybe get Zion.
I would love to see it.
I'm a big Kevin Durant fan. I would love to see it. I think he stays personally. I don't see the reason to leave. I mean, because at the end of the day, if he ends up with 5 or 6, you got 5 or 6, like, no matter.
Now let me ask you, do you have any inside information that you would like to disclose and to share with us?
Well, I'm generally with you. I don't understand why he's so seemingly unhappy in Golden State. It seems like they've set the table there beautifully for him. But the facts are he doesn't seem happy. He's aggrieved all the time. He's snippy with the media. And to me, he looks like he's kind of missing something that's like motivating him, or almost like a passion project, right? And that concerns me. I mean, I think if I was the Warriors, I'd be really nervous about that. Even Steph Curry said recently, like, hey, we've got to play with joy. Steph Curry always plays with joy. I think the he's talking about is Kevin Durant's got to play with joy, right? And he's not going to call anybody out, and he's going to do it kind of the politically correct way. But I think the idea is like, hey, man, you love playing basketball. We're a great basketball team. Why aren't you having a good time this season? And I think the only person who can answer that is Kevin Durant. If he winds up leaving, it would not surprise me at all. I can understand why he would want to go and just try to conquer New York for all the reasons you guys are mentioning about the legacy stuff. But I just hope he doesn't rush into it. As somebody who's followed his career from the very beginning, who actually liked the decision to go to Golden State for him in the first place, because it did give him a level of validation that he didn't have previously in Oklahoma City, and it did raise his profile to a degree that it hadn't previously. I think that he could make a big mistake this summer. If he doesn't pick the right situation in terms of where he wants to play his basketball next season, and he does leave Golden State, that could really blow up in his face, and I could see him regretting it.
Let me ask you, you mentioned that you've noticed, obviously, you've probably been around the team, been around the players, so you've had first-hand observations that maybe he's not as joyful or not as energetic or as happy as he used to be. Do you think any of that can be attributed to the situation that unfolded earlier this season between him and Draymond Green? Or is it more so just the weight of the decision and different things going through his mind at the moment?
Yeah, I never put too much into any one specific situation like that, but obviously that was a real blow up. I was there too. It happened in LA and it was awkward, and afterwards it was pretty awkward too. It wasn't the craziest locker room situation I've ever seen, but it felt a little bit off for a team that's as talented and as, consistent, as the Warriors are. I mean, even his big rant about the media, a couple of weeks ago, I mean, that came after a 39-point win. Guys are supposed to be just like, skipping out of town, going to get dinner after a 39-point win. Why is he getting into this huge, screaming match about the media and everybody grow up and this stuff and that stuff? I mean, I just think he's lost his way a little bit, and I wouldn't blame the Draymond incident. I think sometimes we think we know these players and what's going on in their private lives, and honestly, we don't. And I think, ultimately, the only person who can ensure that Kevin Durant is happy, whether it's on the court or off the court, is Kevin Durant. And I hope that, at this time next year, he's in a better place mentally, whether that means he's still in Golden State and playing in their brand new arena, the Chase Center, which opens next season, or whether he's in Madison Square Garden, or whether he's somewhere else. I hope he just, finds that happiness that is what really drew people to him in the first place, when he was coming up in Oklahoma City, and and carrying that team to Western Conference Finals and Finals appearances.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that insight with us.
Yeah, we really do appreciate it.
And we want to thank you for your time overall. Thank you for answering our questions, and thank you for becoming available to us. We really do appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, guys. Best of luck with the podcast and everything else you're doing, and stay in touch, okay?
Thank you, Ben.
We will. Thank you.